In 1970, a small Japanese car company that most Americans had never heard of shipped a two-door sports car to the United States and priced it at $3,526. The car was called the Datsun 240Z. It looked like a Jaguar E-Type, drove like a Porsche, and cost less than a Chevrolet Corvette by thousands. It gave American drivers the thrill of a British sports car without the British habit of breaking down every time it rained. Within 3 years, it became the fastest-selling sports car in the world. By 1979, Nissan, and then still called Datsun, had sold 86,000 Z cars in a single year. But the 240Z wasn't just a car, it was a statement. While Toyota was building its reputation on conservative reliability and Honda was obsessing over engines, Nissan found a different lane entirely. The lane that said Japanese cars can be exciting. The Maxima became a Japanese BMW. The Sentra SER turned a compact into a weapon. The Skyline GT-R terrified European supercars at a fraction of the cost. Nissan sold the idea that Japan could build something worth wanting, not just depending on. By 1985, Nissan was selling 830,000 vehicles per year in the United States alone, a genuine rival to Toyota and Honda, each holding roughly 6 to 8% of the American market. The company that started by shipping tiny economy cars across the Pacific was now the third largest Japanese automaker in the world, producing vehicles that showed up in driveways, on racetracks, and in the imaginations of an entire generation of car enthusiasts. And then, slowly, quietly, and then all at once, everything fell apart. And what happened next is one of the most dramatic stories in the history of the automotive industry. Buckle up. The first fall, the 1990s disaster. Walk into a Nissan showroom in 1995 and try to find a single car worth getting excited about. Go ahead. The Altima looked like it was designed by committee. The Maxima, the car that was supposed to be a Japanese BMW, had gotten fat and forgettable. The 240SX was dying, the 300ZX was priced out, and the Sentra had become something you rented at an airport and forgot about by dinner. This wasn't a bad year, this was a company that had lost the ability to build anything worth wanting. But here's what makes this infuriating. Nissan knew, and instead of fixing the cars, they blamed the yen, the economy, the regulations. Everyone except the people inside the building making the decisions. While Toyota was perfecting Kaizen, the obsessive never stop improving philosophy that would make them the most profitable automaker on earth. And while Honda was doubling down on building the best engines in the world, Nissan was pointing fingers at currency markets. You can't make this stuff up. 26 straight quarters of declining market share. Let me say that again. 26 consecutive quarters, over 6 years, of getting smaller while everyone around them got bigger. That's not bad luck. That's not the yen. That's a company doing it to itself quarter after quarter and refusing to admit it. By 1999, the damage was catastrophic. $25 billion in debt against $12.6 billion in equity, meaning Nissan owed twice what it was worth. Market share in free fall, factories running at half capacity, dealers jumping ship. The company that had once sold 830,000 cars a year in America was now staring down bankruptcy, real, permanent, lights off forever bankruptcy. And then a man showed up from France with a nickname that tells you everything about what happened next: Lacoste Killer. The Ghosn era, a miracle that became a curse. In 1999, French automaker Renault made one of the most audacious bets in automotive history, investing $5.4 billion into a Japanese company that most analysts had already written off as dead. One rival executive scoffed at the investment and suggested Renault would be better off loading a barge with gold and sinking it in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Renault took the bet anyway. They sent a man named Carlos Ghosn to Tokyo, and within 18 months, he had turned Nissan from a corpse into one of the most profitable car companies on the planet. Ghosn did things that no outsider had ever done inside a Japanese corporation. He closed 5 factories, slashed 21,000 jobs, fired underperforming executives, and publicly declared, "The problem with Nissan is not outside Nissan, the problem is inside." In a culture built on hierarchy and consensus, Ghosn operated like a man who had read the rulebook and set it on fire. The French press nicknamed him Lacoste Killer, and the cuts worked. By 2000, Nissan swung from billions in losses to a $2.3 billion profit. By 2003, operating margins hit 10%, among the best in the entire industry. But here's where the story turns. Because Ghosn didn't just save Nissan, he got addicted to saving it. The turnaround made him a celebrity. Japanese comic books featured him as a character. He was the most famous CEO in Asia. And the success convinced him, and everyone around him, that if Nissan could be rescued, it could also conquer. Think about how dangerous that logic is. A company that was dead 18 months ago is now talking about world domination. That's not confidence, that's amnesia. In 2011, Ghosn launched Project 88, an internal initiative to push Nissan's market share from 8% to over 10% in the United States, overtaking Toyota and Honda. He publicly declared the goal with the kind of confidence that markets love and accountants dread. And now, here's the part where the miracle became the curse, because the pursuit of 10% market share is what ultimately destroyed the company. Growth at all costs. The poison pill. To chase that 10% number, Nissan did something that looked brilliant on quarterly earnings calls and catastrophic the moment you looked past the next quarter. They started paying people to buy their cars. Not literally, but close enough. Fleet sales, bulk orders to rental companies, corporate fleets, and government agencies exploded. Nissan was spending $3,400 per vehicle in incentives just to move metal. That's $3,400 per car, straight off the profit margin, handed to a buyer who will never develop brand loyalty and will dump the car at auction the moment the lease expires. Honda was paying less than half that. Toyota was paying even less. Nissan was essentially bribing the market to hit a number that looked good on a slide deck. By 2016, fleet sales had increased by 42%. Market share peaked at 9.7%, tantalizingly close to Ghosn's magic number. And here's the part that should make every Nissan investor physically sick. While Nissan was chasing that number, profits dropped 9% in a single quarter. They were selling more cars than ever and making less money on each one. Every discounted Rogue sitting in a Hertz parking lot was a vehicle sold below margin. Every incentive dollar was a dollar the company would never see again. Meanwhile, and this is the comparison that kills, Toyota was quietly posting record profits, selling fewer vehicles at higher margins with zero fleet dependency. Nissan was running a race where the finish line moved further away with every step. And while the sales team chased numbers, the product team was starved. The Altima went stale. The SUVs felt like 2012 designs shipped unchanged every year. The Leaf, which had been the first mass-market electric vehicle in 2010, was left to rot without meaningful updates, while Tesla built the Model 3 and captured the entire EV conversation. Now here's the part that makes car people want to scream into a pillow. Nissan had the first-mover advantage on electric vehicles. The Leaf was the world's first mass-market EV in 2010, a full 7 years before the Tesla Model 3. 7 years. In the tech world, 7 years is an eternity. Nissan had more time to dominate the EV market than Apple had between inventing the iPhone and owning the smartphone industry. And Nissan did nothing with it. By the time Tesla was selling 500,000 Model 3s per year, the Leaf was still running on its original platform with a range that barely covered a suburban commute. The biggest head start in automotive history. Wasted. Not by a competitor, by the company that had the lead and forgot to keep running. Fleet buyers don't develop brand loyalty, they develop price sensitivity. And when the incentives dried up, those buyers disappeared overnight. The arrest that shook the world. On November 19, 2018, Carlos Ghosn landed at Tokyo's Haneda Airport and was immediately arrested. The most powerful CEO in Asian automotive history, comic book hero, corporate savior, was taken from the airport in handcuffs. The charges: underreporting $80 million in compensation and misusing corporate assets. Ghosn was held in a Tokyo cell for over 100 days under a pretrial system that international observers called hostage justice. But the real story wasn't the charges, it was who reported him. Nissan's own executives had orchestrated the investigation and handed results to prosecutors. Not for justice, for power. Ghosn had been negotiating deeper Renault integration that would have given France control over Nissan. The executives wanted out from under Renault's thumb, and removing Ghosn was the mechanism. The structural problem made this inevitable. Renault held 36.8% of Nissan with voting rights. Nissan held 15% of Renault with none. Renault gave orders, Nissan took them. That imbalance was a time bomb, and Ghosn's arrest was the detonation. Then came the scene that turned a corporate scandal into a Hollywood thriller. On December 29, 2019, Carlos Ghosn escaped Japan, smuggled out of his Tokyo apartment, driven to Osaka, and loaded into a large audio equipment case that was carried onto a private jet bound for Istanbul, and then Beirut. A former Green Beret named Michael Taylor organized the operation. Ghosn literally fled the country, one of the most powerful CEOs in Asia, hiding inside a box designed for concert speakers, on a private jet, organized by a former Green Beret. You cannot make this stuff up. This is a real story about a real CEO of a real car company. He remains in Lebanon to this day, beyond the reach of Japanese extradition. The downward spiral, 2019 to 2025. What followed Ghosn's escape was chaos, pure corporate self-inflicted chaos, 4 CEOs in 8 years. Saikawa was ousted on his own financial accusations within months. Uchida spent 5 years trying to stabilize a company that was collapsing faster than he could reorganize it. One insider called it a man-made disaster, a combat inside the place that is destroying the company. Here's what the destruction actually looked like in numbers, and stay with me, because the pattern is the point. In 2019, Nissan lost $6.2 billion, the first annual loss in over a decade. The executives called it a correction. Then in fiscal 2024, another $4.5 billion vanished. They called it restructuring. Then fiscal 2025, another $3 billion gone. That's $14 billion in cumulative losses from a company that was posting 10% margins just years earlier. Let me put that in perspective. You can actually feel $14 billion is enough to buy the entire Mazda Corporation outright and still have change left over for Subaru. Nissan didn't just lose money. Nissan lost more money than most car companies are worth. Meanwhile, Maxima, and this contrast is the whole story, Toyota set an all-time global sales record. Honda posted gains. Hyundai Kia surged past every previous benchmark. The economy wasn't collapsing, the industry wasn't struggling, only Nissan was burning while everyone else celebrated. They did this to themselves. Meanwhile, the product lineup continued to stagnate. Walk into a Nissan showroom in 2024 and you'd see vehicles identical to 2018. Same platforms, same infotainment that felt ancient next to the Hyundai across the street. One journalist described the LA Auto Show display as a showroom from 2018 accidentally transplanted into 2025. Nissan had become a time capsule that charged full price for admission. In China, domestic brands like BYD crushed every Japanese manufacturer with cheaper, better EVs. Nissan's Ariya arrived too late and too expensive. China market share collapsed, taking billions with it. The Honda deal that almost was, and then came the moment that told the entire industry just how desperate Nissan had become. In late 2024, Nissan approached Honda, its historic rival, the company it had competed against for 60 years, and asked for a merger. Think about what that means? Imagine Pepsi calling Coca-Cola and saying, "We need you to save us." That's the level of desperation. The two companies announced they were exploring a full combination that would create the world's third-largest automaker by volume. For a brief, surreal moment, it looked like the two pillars of Japanese automotive pride might become one. Then Honda looked at the books and walked away. That single sentence, "Honda walked away," is the most devastating verdict any competitor has ever delivered on Nissan. Because Honda wasn't a hedge fund looking for a quick profit. Honda was the one company on earth that understood Nissan's engineering, Nissan's market, and Nissan's potential better than anyone. And even Honda concluded the damage was too deep to fix within the timeline required. If your most logical partner in the world won't take the deal, what does that tell the rest of the market? Makoto Uchida resigned immediately after the collapse. Nissan was alone again, leaderless, bleeding billions, and running out of options. The music had stopped, and Nissan was the one without a chair. The last chance. Ivan Espinosa and Nissan. In April 2025, Nissan turned to its fourth CEO in 8 years. Ivan Espinosa, a Mexican-born engineer, who inherited a company losing billions while Toyota posted its best year ever and Hyundai Kia surged past every benchmark. Only Nissan was shrinking. Espinosa was given 6 weeks to produce a survival plan, 6 weeks to determine the future of a 92-year-old company with 136,000 employees and operations on every continent. The plan he delivered was called Nissan, and the scale of the cuts tells you exactly how desperate the situation had become. 20,000 jobs eliminated, 7 factories closed, reduced from 17 to 10 worldwide, including plants in Japan itself. 2 design studios shut down. Production capacity slashed by 30%. Cost savings target, $3.7 billion. And perhaps the most telling detail, Nissan is now reportedly considering selling its own Yokohama headquarters building, with KKR leading the bidding at approximately $600 million. When a company sells the building with its name on the front, the building where every Nissan has been approved, every strategy has been debated, every CEO has sat. The crisis isn't coming. The crisis is standing in the lobby. But Espinosa isn't just cutting. New models are coming, including a plug-in hybrid Rogue and a redesigned Skyline. Development timelines have been compressed from 50 months to 37 months. Because at the speed Nissan is burning cash, 50 months is a luxury the company can't afford. Nissan ended 2025 with roughly 58% of its U.S. vehicles built domestically, up from 45%, a strategic hedge against tariffs that has already begun showing results. And here's the number that gives the story a pulse. U.S. market share climbed from 4.2% in 2024 to 5.6% by summer 2025, without a single new model. Just better execution, better dealer relationships, and the kind of focused discipline that Nissan hasn't demonstrated since Ghosn's early years. Nissan posted a $3 billion net loss for fiscal year 2025, its second consecutive year in the red. The company forecasts a modest $120 million profit for fiscal 2026, barely a rounding error on a $74 billion revenue base. When asked directly whether Nissan could be sold, Espinosa didn't say no. He said, "I wouldn't rule anything out," the kind of answer that keeps analysts on edge and employees up at night. The lesson: what killed Nissan? Here's what you need to understand about what happened to Nissan. Because the lesson isn't about cars, the lesson is about what happens when a company stops being the thing that made it special. Nissan was the Japanese brand that made exciting cars. That was the identity. That was the lane. While Toyota owned conservative reliability and Honda owned engineering precision, Nissan owned the idea that a car could be practical and thrilling. The 240Z, the Skyline, the Maxima, the 350Z, every iconic Nissan was a vehicle that made you feel something beyond basic transportation. The moment Nissan abandoned that identity to chase market share, it stopped being Nissan. It became a discount manufacturer selling uninspired products to fleet buyers who couldn't care less about the badge. Competing on price against Toyota and Honda is like competing on endurance against a machine that never sleeps. Ghosn saved Nissan from financial death, but planted the seeds of identity death. He was a financial surgeon, not a car guy. He could cut costs better than anyone alive, but he couldn't tell the product team what made a Nissan special. The magic had always come from engineers given freedom to build something worth wanting, and those engineers were now buried under fleet targets and incentive budgets. And the leadership chaos that followed, 4 CEOs, internal warfare, a criminal escape, a failed merger, prevented anyone from asking the one question that matters: what does Nissan stand for now? Espinosa might be the person who finally answers that question. The early signals, market share recovery, faster product development, operational discipline, suggest a company that's at least trying to find its footing. But the debt is still $5 billion. The stock is still down 70% from its peak. 7 factories are closing. 20,000 people are losing their jobs. And the competitors who surpassed Nissan, Toyota, Honda, Hyundai, BYD, are not slowing down to let them catch up. The story of Nissan is not over, but the clock is running, and the company that once built the fastest-selling sports car in the world is now racing against something it can't outrun: its own past. $25 billion in debt, $5.4 billion from Renault, a CEO who became a celebrity, a comic book hero who escaped in a speaker box, 4 CEOs in 8 years, a failed merger with Honda, $14 billion in losses, 20,000 jobs gone, 7 factories closed, and a new CEO who won't rule out selling the company. From a $3,526 sports car that changed the world to a $5 billion loss that might end it. The rise and fall of Nissan isn't just an automotive story. It's the story of what happens when a company forgets who it is and spends a decade paying the price for that amnesia, while every competitor it used to rival watches from the winner's circle. And whether Nissan remembers in time is the question the entire industry is watching.